Hello. Let's talk about sentences and word order in English. I'm Julie Chancho. Let's go. The basic idea with sentences is that they have a complete idea. Sometimes sentences are very short. This one has just one word, stop. Yet, it's a sentence. It's a complete idea. You can understand it very easily. He gets up early. This is also a sentence. It has a complete idea. You can understand it just by reading that sentence. Sentences can be affirmative, or positive, or negative. She likes reading. This is an affirmative sentence. He does not like spiders. Does not shows the negative. This is a negative sentence. Do you like spiders? That's a question. Questions are also sentences. For example, how old are you? Or what is your favorite food? Questions are indicated with a question mark at the end. These are what we call open questions. They require some kind of response. I am 5 years old. Pizza is my favorite food. In English, sentences usually follow the order subject, verb, object. She plays tennis. She is the subject. Plays is the verb, and tennis is the object. It receives the action of the verb play. What does she play? Tennis. He watches the baby. The verb is watches, so you can easily identify the subject. The subject in English usually comes to the left of the verb. So he watches. He is responsible for the action watch. And what does he watch? The baby. The baby is the object of the verb watch. Interrogative sentences have an auxiliary verb first. The auxiliary verb is a helping verb. It just helps to make the question. Does she play tennis? We add does before the verb at the very beginning to make the question. So does is the auxiliary verb. Does he watch the baby? Notice how the verb watch changed its form. In the previous sentence, he watches the baby. This is the present tense. Does he watch the baby is still in the present tense, but does is the verb that is conjugated, and watch stays in what we call the base form. Simple sentences or clauses have a subject, a verb, and a complete thought. So remember at the beginning we said all sentences have a complete thought. All sentences have at least one clause. In order to be a clause, it must have a subject and a verb. She waited, or Joe waited for the train. This is a complete thought, and it has a subject and a verb. Therefore, this sentence is a clause. The train was late. We have a subject, the train. We have a verb, was, and this makes complete sense. So it's a complete thought. The train was late. This is another clause. Mary and Samantha took the bus. Now we have a compound subject. We have two people, and both of them are responsible for the verb took. So they, Mary and Samantha, form the subject of this sentence. Mary and Samantha took the bus. It's a complete thought. We have a subject and a verb, so it's a clause. I looked for Mary and Samantha at the bus station. I is the subject, looked is the verb. Now, what did I look for? I looked for Mary and Samantha. That's the object. They're receiving the action of the verb looked. Remember our word order? Subject, verb, object in English. All of these clauses or sentences in this slide have subject, verb, and a complete idea. Therefore, they are independent clauses. They make sense on their own. We have a group of words called coordinating conjunctions. These coordinating conjunctions can be used to connect clauses together. When we use them to connect clauses or sentences, we use a comma before the coordinating conjunction. So we have a nice little graphic here that shows sentence, comma, the coordinating conjunction, and then the other sentence. Remember, the comma goes before the coordinating conjunction. You can remember the coordinating conjunctions in English by the acronym FANBOYS. F stands for, A stands for and, N is nor, B is but, O is or, Y is yet, and S is so. So fanboys will help you to remember the coordinating conjunctions in English. Notice in these sentences here that we have two clauses that are connected by a coordinating conjunction. So for example, Joe waited for the train, comma, but the train was late. So notice that Joe waited for the train is a complete idea. We could put a period there. We have a subject, we have a verb, we have a complete idea. Therefore, it's a sentence. But we can make more sophisticated sentences by connecting it with a coordinating conjunction. I'll let you analyze the rest of the sentences here on your own. Notice the comma before the coordinating conjunction, and notice that each half of the sentence has a subject and a verb and a complete idea. If you don't have a subject in one of these clauses, then you don't use the comma. You only use the comma if you have two clauses. Remember, a clause has a subject and a verb. Complex sentences have an independent clause with one or more dependent clauses. So far we've been looking at independent clauses. Remember, independent clauses have a complete idea. Subordinate clauses or dependent clauses do not have a complete idea. These are some examples of subordinating conjunctions. We use subordinating conjunctions to begin dependent clauses. So words like while, because, if, whenever, these are all subordinating conjunctions that will begin dependent clauses. So here are a few examples of dependent clauses. Because Mary and Samantha arrived at the bus station before noon. It's not a complete idea. Therefore, it's not a sentence. However, it is a clause. We have a subject, Mary and Samantha, and we have a verb, arrived. But since it's not a complete idea, it's a dependent clause. Therefore, it's not a sentence. Let's look at one more. While he waited at the train station. It's not a complete idea. While he waited, what did he do? We have a subject, he. We have a verb, waited, but we don't have a complete idea. Therefore, this is a dependent clause or a subordinate clause. The same is true for the last example. After they left on the bus. Not a complete idea, not an independent clause, not a sentence. It's a dependent clause. We can put sentences together with an independent clause and a dependent clause. In fact, the dependent clause must have an independent clause to complete the idea. The independent clause can go first, In these examples, the independent clause is in bold, and the dependent clause is second. It's not in bold. Notice that when the independent clause comes first, we do not put a comma before the dependent clause. This is a very common mistake. Many people would like to put a comma here after station and before because. This is considered incorrect, although you might see it because a lot of people make this mistake. So pay attention. It's not required and in fact is wrong in this case. We can also put the dependent clause first. So notice that the dependent clause now is in bold, and the second half of the sentence is the independent clause. Remember, the dependent clause needs the independent clause to complete it, to give it full meaning. Now we use a comma. So when we start with because, we put a comma after the dependent clause. We have another type of sentence in English called the compound complex sentence. We already saw compound sentences. Remember, that's when we join two independent clauses using a coordinating conjunction. And we saw complex sentences. That's when we had a dependent clause and an independent clause. So in compound complex sentences, we have both. We have a dependent clause and we have two independent clauses joined by a coordinating conjunction. In these examples here, the dependent clause is underlined. Can you identify the independent clauses? Notice the use of the comma before the coordinating conjunctions. Thank you.